You're watching Fictional Scientist, a journey into alternate realities, fractured timelines, and high stakes thought experiments. August 8th, 2023. A day that would erase a historic Hawaiian town and raise questions nobody in power wanted to answer. Lahaina had stood for centuries, former capital of the Hawaiian Kingdom, historic whaling port, home to the largest banyan tree in the United States, a town of 13,000 people, mostly native Hawaiians and longtime residents, working class families, multi generational homes, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. And in 6 hours, it was gone. The fire started around 6:30 a.m. Initial reports said downed power lines sparked flames in dry brush. Hawaiian Electric had been warned about fire risks, had known their equipment was aging and dangerous, but maintenance was expensive. Shareholders wanted dividends. The infrastructure waited to fail. By noon, the fire had jumped containment lines. Winds, hurricane-force winds from offshore Hurricane Dora, were pushing flames toward Lahaina. Emergency alerts went out. Evacuate. Leave now. Traffic jammed on the single highway out of town. Some people made it. Many didn't. By 6 p.m., Lahaina was gone, completely destroyed. The before and after satellite images looked apocalyptic. Green and brown and blue, the colors of a coastal town replaced by gray ash and black char. Nothing standing, nothing recognizable. Just rubble and death. Official casualty count 100 dead. But residents said more, many more. Families unaccounted for. People who'd been home when the fires came and never made it out. Bodies that were never found because they'd been incinerated so completely that even bones turned to ash. The immediate narrative was clear. Climate change, dry conditions, high winds, utility company negligence. A perfect storm of natural disaster and corporate failure. Tragic but explainable. Horrible but understandable. Except people who saw it, who survived it, said it wasn't like that at all. It wasn't a normal fire, one survivor told anyone who'd listen. It was like something was targeting us. The flames moved wrong, jumped in ways fire shouldn't jump, burned things that shouldn't burn while leaving other things untouched. It was like someone was choosing what to destroy. The mainstream media didn't cover those statements. Too speculative, too conspiratorial. The narrative was set. Natural disaster plus corporate negligence equals tragedy. Case closed. But the forensic evidence told a different story. A story that investigators were told not to talk about. A story that got people killed when they tried to expose it. The fire investigator had worked major incidents for 23 years. California wildfires, Colorado forest fires, urban conflagrations. He understood fire behavior, how flames spread, what burns at what temperature, the physics and chemistry of combustion. Lahaina didn't make sense. He arrived 5 days after the fire, part of a federal assessment team, FEMA, ATF, independent consultants documenting the damage, investigating the cause, building the official record. What he found violated everything he knew about fire. The cars were the first anomaly. Hundreds of vehicles throughout the burn zone. Most were melted, not burned, melted. The metal frames had liquefied and re-solidified. Aluminum engine blocks had turned to puddles. Steel chassis were warped beyond recognition. Glass hadn't just broken, it had vaporized, leaving nothing but twisted metal and melted plastic. The investigator took temperature readings from the residue, analyzed the metallurgical changes. The heat required to do this to vehicles wasn't from a wildfire. Standard structure fires burned at 800 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Intense forest fires might reach 1200 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit for brief periods. These vehicles showed exposure to temperatures exceeding 2700 degrees Fahrenheit. Sustained, concentrated, the kind of heat that required accelerants or industrial equipment or directed energy. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was what didn't burn. 3 meters from a completely melted car, a tree stood green, leaves intact, bark uncharred, like the fire had drawn a circle around the vehicle and stopped. The investigator documented it, photographed it, showed his supervisor. Microclimate effects, the supervisor said. Wind patterns. The fire moved in unpredictable ways because of the hurricane winds. Fire doesn't work like that, the investigator replied. Heat radiates. If a car reached 2,700 degrees, everything within 10 meters should show char. But these trees are untouched, like the heat was focused, directed only at specific targets. Write up your findings, the supervisor said, but Keep the speculation out of the official report. We're documenting damage, not theorizing about impossible scenarios. The investigator kept documenting. The pattern repeated throughout Lahaina. Structures burned to foundations, metal staircases melted into slag, while plastic garbage cans next to them stood unscathed. Houses reduced to ash while their wooden fences remained standing. The burn patterns weren't random, they were selective. Precise, like something had chosen what to destroy and what to spare. He found more anomalies. The blue roof phenomenon. Houses with blue painted roofs had survived while everything around them burned. Initially dismissed as coincidence, but the pattern was too consistent. Over a dozen structures with blue roofs standing intact in otherwise devastated blocks. Blue materials reflect certain wavelengths, certain laser frequencies. If something was targeting structures with directed energy weapons, blue surfaces might deflect or absorb the energy differently. The investigator didn't write that in his report, but he documented the blue roofs, photographed them, added them to his growing file of evidence that something was very wrong with the official narrative. He also documented the underground fires. Days after the main fire was contained, underground blazes were still burning. Roots, infrastructure, things that shouldn't sustain combustion, but something was burning hot enough to keep them going. Could be accelerants, a colleague suggested. Gasoline, propane tanks. But the investigator checked. No evidence of accelerant-enhanced burning. No chemical signatures, just impossibly hot fires that refused to die. He started asking questions, reaching out to other investigators, comparing notes with people who'd worked other suspicious fires. One investigator messaged him, "Stop, you're looking at something you don't want to find. If you value your career, if you value your life, write your report, collect your paycheck, and forget what you saw." "What did you see?" the investigator asked. "Paradise, California, 2018. Same patterns, same impossible temperatures, same selective destruction. I tried to report it. My findings were classified. I was told to sign an NDA or face federal prosecution. Choose carefully." The investigator thought about his family, his career, the weight of knowing truth versus the safety of accepting lies. He wrote 2 reports. The official one said what FEMA wanted: catastrophic wildfire caused by utility infrastructure failure exacerbated by drought and wind. Tragic but explainable. The unofficial one, encrypted, backed up in multiple secure locations, said what the evidence showed. Lahaina wasn't a wildfire. It was a controlled demolition, a targeted strike, using technology that officially didn't exist, for purposes that served powerful interests. He didn't know why yet, but he knew the fire wasn't natural, and he knew people were lying about it. 3 months before the fire, Oprah Winfrey purchased 870 acres of land on Maui. Not in Lahaina, the adjacent area, up in the highlands. Historic Hawaiian land, beautiful views, the kind of property developers had been trying to acquire for decades. The sellers were longtime residents, families who'd held that land for generations. They hadn't wanted to sell, but Oprah's offer was substantial, life-changing money, and she promised to respect the land, to honor its history. The purchase made local news, Oprah expanding her Maui holdings. She already owned hundreds of acres on the island. This was just more of the same, a billionaire collecting paradise. 6 months before the fire, an investment firm linked to Jeff Bezos made offers on properties in Lahaina, not through Amazon, through a private equity fund. Quiet offers, above market rate, targeting specific parcels, waterfront properties, historic sites, land with development potential. Most owners declined. Lahaina wasn't for sale. This was home, history, heritage. You didn't sell your ancestors' land to billionaires for luxury resorts. The investment firm noted the rejections, documented the properties, filed the information away for future reference. 1 year before the fire, the Maui County government approved preliminary planning for a sustainable smart city development. Green energy, modern infrastructure, the future of urban living in Hawaii. The proposed location wasn't finalized, but the project was real. Funding secured, waiting for the right opportunity. Then Lahaina burned, and suddenly, opportunity appeared. Within a month of the fire, the land grab began. Not obviously, not crudely, but systematically, methodically, with the efficiency of a plan that had been prepared in advance. Survivors received letters, development companies offering to buy their burned properties, take the burden away, start fresh somewhere else. We'll handle the cleanup and rebuilding. The offers were low, disaster sale low, a fraction of what the land was worth. But the letters came with subtle threats about liability, about rebuild codes, about how long it would take to restore services, about how the government might use eminent domain if owners didn't sell voluntarily. Some people sold, desperate, traumatized, unable to face the idea of rebuilding, taking what they could and leaving. Others refused. This is our land. Our ancestors are buried here. We're not leaving. Those families received different letters from lawyers, from code enforcement, from the county government. Suddenly, their properties had violations, zoning issues, environmental concerns, rebuilding permits denied for technical reasons that made no sense. The pressure was relentless, designed to exhaust, to overwhelm, to force capitulation. A native Hawaiian activist started tracking the land transfers, documenting who was buying and at what prices, building a database of the land grab in real time. She found patterns, shell companies, private equity firms, investment groups with hidden ownership structures. But when she traced them back far enough, the same names kept appearing. Tech billionaires, development corporations, mainland investors. And the parcels being acquired, they matched almost exactly with the preliminary smart city development plans, like someone had known where to buy, what would be valuable, what would be cleared, like someone had known Lahaina would burn. The activist published her findings online. "They burned us out," she wrote. "This was planned. This was theft. This is the newest version of the Hawaiian kingdom's overthrow. Burn the natives out and buy their land." The post went viral in Hawaiian communities. Anger, outrage, recognition. Everyone could see it now. The pattern was too obvious, but mainstream media didn't cover it. Or when they did, it was framed as conspiracy theories from grieving community members, not as investigative journalism, not as questions that needed answers. The land transfers continued, month by month. More properties sold, more families displaced, more of Lahaina turning from Hawaiian-owned to mainland corporation-owned. By 6 months after the fire, over 40% of affected properties had changed hands. By 9 months, over 60%. The number kept climbing. And then came the official announcement. The Maui County government, in partnership with state and federal agencies, announced the Lahaina Sustainable Smart City Project, a $4 billion development. Green energy, modern infrastructure, affordable housing, economic revitalization, built on the ashes of what they'd destroyed, using land they'd stolen through fire and trauma. The irony, or the cruelty, was the project promised to help the very people it was displacing, bringing residents back, honoring Hawaiian culture, building a better future. But the native Hawaiians who'd lived in Lahaina for generations, they knew they wouldn't be coming back. The new Lahaina would be too expensive, too sanitized, too corporate. It would be Hawaii for tourists and billionaires, not for the people who called it home. The firefighter had served Lahaina's fire department for 18 years. He knew every hydrant, every water line, every access point. His job was protecting the town. And on August 8th, when the fire came, he couldn't do his job because someone had cut the water. The official story was that the fire damaged electrical infrastructure, which shut down the pumps that fed the water system. Without power, no water pressure. Without pressure, hydrants didn't work. Tragic timing. Bad luck compounding disaster. But the firefighter knew that wasn't true because the water was shut off before the fire reached the electrical substations. He'd been at Station 2 when the first evacuations began, before the fire jumped containment. While there was still time to prepare, his crew started checking equipment, connecting to hydrants, making sure everything worked. The hydrants were dry, all of them, in different parts of town, on different water mains, systematically dry. "It's the emergency valves," a veteran firefighter said. "Someone shut the feed valves manually. This isn't system failure, this is sabotage." They reported it immediately to the fire chief, to emergency management. "We have no water. Someone shut us down." The response was to get crews to the harbor, to pump ocean water, to jury-rig a supply system that should never have been necessary because Lahaina had a perfectly functional water network that someone had deliberately disabled. The firefighter survived the fire, saved lives, watched his town burn knowing he couldn't stop it because the tools he needed had been taken away. After the fire, he tried to report what happened, tried to investigate who had shut the valves and why. Access to the valve system was restricted. Only utility workers and specific government officials had keys and control. He requested logs, documentation, proof of who'd accessed the system in the days before the fire. The records were classified. Ongoing investigation, he was told. Security concerns. He pushed. Contacted journalists. Explained what he knew. That the water shutdown was an accident. That it had to be intentional. That without water, Lahaina never had a chance. 2 days before he was scheduled to give a detailed interview to a national news outlet, he died. Single-car accident. Lost control on a familiar road he'd driven thousands of times. Crashed into a ravine. No witnesses, no mechanical failure found, just tragic bad luck. The official report ruled it accidental death. No investigation needed. But his colleagues knew. He'd been scared. He'd told them he felt watched, that his phone was tapped, that cars were following him. They dismissed it as paranoia, trauma from the fire, stress. Now they wondered. The interview he was supposed to give never happened. The evidence he was going to share, video from fire trucks showing dry hydrants before the electrical system failed, communications logs showing reports of valve closures, all of it seized during the investigation of his death. Personal effects. Evidence and traffic investigation, then sealed, classified, disappeared. His death sent a message to other firefighters who knew the truth. Talk, and you might end up dead too. Keep quiet, accept the official story. Don't ask dangerous questions. Most complied. A few didn't. They documented what they knew, shared information quietly, built an underground archive of evidence that the water system was deliberately sabotaged. Because if you wanted to destroy Lahaina completely, if you wanted to ensure maximum damage, cutting the water was step one. Make it impossible to fight. Let it burn until nothing remained. The question was, who had that kind of access, that kind of authority, that kind of motive, and how far would they go to keep it secret? The satellite operator ran an independent ground station in Colorado, tracking satellites, monitoring thermal imagery, open source intelligence gathering. His equipment wasn't classified, just commercially available hardware and software that anyone with money and skill could assemble. On August 8, 2023, he was tracking weather patterns over Hawaii. Hurricane Dora's effects, atmospheric conditions, academic interest, data collection. He captured something impossible. The first anomaly appeared at 2:47 p.m. local time. Thermal imaging showing intense heat signatures in Lahaina. Expected, the fire was already burning, but these signatures were different. Not diffuse like spreading flames, pinpoint, precise, moving in straight lines, like targeting beams. He reviewed the data, checked his instruments, verified with other satellite feeds. The anomaly was real. Something in the sky above Lahaina was emitting focused thermal radiation. Multiple sources, moving systematically. At 3:14 p.m., he recorded a blue spectrum flash, high energy, visible light wavelength, lasting approximately 0.3 seconds, followed immediately by ground-level heat blooms at the exact location of the flash. He'd seen this before. In demonstrations of directed energy weapons, DEWs, lasers or microwave emitters capable of projecting concentrated energy at ground targets. The military had tested them for years. Anti-drone systems, vehicle disablers, crowd control. This looked like a DEW strike, multiple strikes, coordinated, systematic. He recorded everything, multiple angles, multiple wavelengths, building an archive of evidence that Lahaina wasn't burning naturally, it was being burned deliberately. By evening, he had 14 distinct DU signatures, 14 moments where something in the sky had projected focused energy onto specific locations in Lahaina. Every time, fires had started or intensified at those exact points. He tried to identify the source. Satellites, aircraft, his tracking software couldn't pinpoint exact altitude or platform, but the trajectory suggested high altitude, orbital or near orbital, too high for conventional aircraft, which meant satellites or something operating from space, with weapons capabilities officially non-existent. He reported his findings, first to NASA, then to NOAA, then to military contacts he had from previous research projects, sent them the data, the thermal imagery, the spectral analysis, everything proving that directed energy weapons had been used on Lahaina. NASA classified his report within hours. NOAA thanked him and asked him not to discuss his findings publicly pending review. His military contacts stopped responding to calls. 2 weeks later, he received a visit. 3 men in suits, no badges, no identification. Polite but firm. The data you collected is classified, they told him. National security. You'll turn over all copies, all records, all analysis. You'll sign an NDA. You won't discuss this with anyone. What if I refuse? He asked. Then you'll be prosecuted for unauthorized collection of classified information, espionage charges, federal prison. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice. He signed, handed over his drives, agreed to forget what he'd seen, but he'd made backups first. Encrypted, hidden, distributed to trusted colleagues with instructions to release if anything happened to him. He went quiet, stopped researching Maui, moved on to other projects, appeared to comply. But he knew what he'd seen. He'd watched a Hawaiian town be destroyed from space using advanced weapons, watched it happen in real time, recorded proof, and that proof was still out there, waiting, ready to expose the truth if the right person found it and had the courage to publish it. The weapons engineer had worked for Lockheed Martin from 2015 to 2022 on classified projects, advanced systems, things that officially didn't exist, including orbital W platforms, directed energy weapons deployed on satellites, capable of projecting laser or microwave energy with pinpoint accuracy at ground targets. The official purpose? Defense. Disabling enemy satellites, protecting US space assets, non-lethal crowd control, the future of precision warfare. The actual capabilities, much more versatile, could start fires, melt metal, induce electrical failures, target specific structures with minimal collateral damage, operate invisibly from orbit, leave minimal evidence. The perfect weapon for deniable operations, for creating disasters that look natural, for clearing areas without obvious military action. The engineer had helped design the targeting systems, the thermal management, the power distribution. He understood exactly how these weapons worked and what they could do. When Lahaina burned, he recognized the signatures immediately. The selective destruction, the impossible temperatures, the precision. This was due work. Had to be. Nothing else fit the pattern. He started researching, pulled up satellite orbital data, cross-referenced with the Maui fire timeline, found matches. 3 US military intelligence satellites had been in position to target Lahaina during the critical hours. Not proof. These satellites were officially classified. Their capabilities weren't publicly documented. But he knew what they were, had worked on their systems, knew they were exactly what had been used. He wrote a detailed technical analysis, explaining how orbital DEWs could create the burn patterns seen in Lahaina, how they could melt vehicles while leaving nearby vegetation intact, how they could operate invisibly, leaving only thermal signatures that most people wouldn't recognize. He posted it anonymously on technical forums, defense contractor message boards, places where people would understand the analysis and verify his math. The response was mixed. Some called it speculation. Some called it classified information that he shouldn't be discussing. Some thanked him for finally explaining what everyone in the defense industry quietly knew. Orbital Ws were operational, and they'd been used on American soil. His post was deleted within hours, his account banned, his encrypted access revoked, but screenshots had spread. The analysis was out there. 2 weeks later, he received a call from his former employer. Retirement agreement violation. Disclosure of classified information. We need to discuss this. I didn't disclose anything specific to projects I worked on, he replied. I discussed publicly available technology in theoretical terms. That's not how we see it. You'll report to our legal department. We'll determine appropriate response. He knew what that meant. Lawsuits, NDA violations, career destruction at minimum, criminal charges at maximum. He disappeared before they could serve him, liquidated assets, left the country, went dark. From overseas, he continued posting. More details, more analysis, explaining exactly how Lahaina had been destroyed and why the evidence proved it wasn't a natural fire. Most platforms banned him, shadow banned his posts, flagged his content as misinformation. But enough leaked through, enough people saw it, enough technical experts verified his analysis. The truth was spreading, slowly, through underground channels, but spreading. And the engineer kept posting, kept explaining, kept proving that Lahaina was destroyed deliberately using advanced weapons, that it was murder disguised as natural disaster, that powerful people had burned a Hawaiian town to steal land and build their vision of the future on the ashes. The survivor had lived in Lahaina her entire life, 38 years in the same house, her grandmother's house, her great-grandmother's house. 5 generations of family history in Lahaina. She escaped the fire with her children. Barely. Driving through flames, smoke so thick she couldn't see 10 feet. Heat so intense the car's paint bubbled. But she saw something she couldn't explain. Something that haunted her. Blue lights. In the sky, moving, sweeping across the town like search beams. And wherever they touched, fire erupted. It wasn't lightning, she told anyone who'd listen. It wasn't power lines. It was something from above, something that was targeting us. I saw it with my own eyes, blue beams from the sky, and then fire, over and over. Most people dismissed her testimony. Trauma, stress, the mind creating patterns to make sense of horror. Understandable, but not reliable. But she wasn't alone. Dozens of survivors reported seeing the same thing. Blue lights, beams from the sky, fires starting in places that didn't make sense. The pattern was too consistent to dismiss. One survivor recorded video, shaky, smoky, but clear enough, a blue flash in the sky, lasting seconds, followed by a structure bursting into flames. Not gradual ignition, not spreading fire, instantaneous combustion. The video went viral on social media, millions of views, people analyzing every frame, discussing what it showed, debating whether it was real or manipulated. Mainstream media fact-checkers declared it likely doctored or misidentified lens flare. No major outlet investigated seriously, but independent journalists did. They interviewed survivors, collected testimonies, documented the consistency of the reports. Over 100 people reported seeing the blue lights, seeing things burn in ways that didn't match normal fire behavior, seeing evidence that something from above was attacking Lahaina. The pattern of testimony was damning. These weren't conspiracy theorists, these were normal people. Teachers, shop owners, retirees, people with no agenda except telling the truth about what they'd experienced. And their truth contradicted the official narrative completely. Some survivors tried to testify officially, to FEMA, to federal investigators, to the insurance companies assessing claims. They were told their testimony was not relevant or not credible, or emotional rather than factual. Their experiences were erased from the official record, excluded from investigations, treated as if they didn't exist. But they did exist, and they kept talking, kept sharing their stories, kept insisting that what happened in Lahaina wasn't a wildfire. It was an attack. The Hawaiian activist had been fighting for native rights her entire adult life. Land sovereignty, cultural preservation, protection of sacred sites. The battle never ended. The encroachment never stopped. Lahaina was just the latest assault, the most blatant, the most catastrophic. She started organizing immediately, connecting survivors, documenting land grabs, tracking who was buying and why, building a case that Lahaina's destruction was deliberate theft. She held community meetings, brought in lawyers, started filing lawsuits, demanding investigations, demanding accountability, demanding justice. The response was silence from government, hostility from developers, threats from anonymous sources. Stop making trouble, one message said. You're hurting the recovery. Hawaii needs to move forward, not dwell on conspiracy theories. People need jobs and housing, not your activism. She kept pushing, because this wasn't about her. It was about her people, about the land, about refusing to be erased one more time. Hawaii had been stolen before. 1893, the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. American businessmen, U.S. military support, a sovereign nation taken by force and deception. Lahaina was the same crime, new century, new methods, but the same result. Native Hawaiians displaced, their land taken, their culture erased. She connected with activists across Hawaii on other islands in other communities facing similar pressures, built a network, shared information, coordinated resistance. They found patterns, development projects pushing Native communities out, land acquisitions by mainland corporations, infrastructure projects that somehow always affected Hawaiian-owned properties. Maui wasn't unique. It was just the most visible, the most extreme, the test case for a larger strategy. They're clearing us out, she told her coalition. Systematically. They want Hawaii for tourists and billionaires. We're in the way. And they'll use any method, fire, regulation, economic pressure, whatever works, to remove us. They organized protests, media campaigns, legal challenges, everything they could to fight back, to make noise, to prevent the land grab from succeeding quietly. And they were effective. Enough to slow things down, enough to create attention, enough to make the developers and government officials uncomfortable. which made them targets. The activist's home was vandalized, her car was tampered with, she received death threats, credible ones, specific ones. Stop or we'll stop you. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Too many people were counting on her. Too much was at stake, but she started taking precautions, security systems, varying routines, backup documentation stored off-site, dead man switches ready to release information if she disappeared, because she knew she was fighting enemies with resources and reach she couldn't match. All she had was truth, determination, and the hope that enough people would care to make a difference. The journalist had covered Hawaii for 10 years, local politics, environmental issues, tourism impact. She knew the islands, knew the people, knew how to tell their stories. When Lahaina burned, she was there within days, interviewing survivors, documenting damage, investigating the official narrative, and she found holes. Big ones. Obvious ones. The kind of holes that demanded follow-up questions. Why did the water system fail before the electrical grid? Who shut the valves and why? Why were there reports of blue lights in the sky? Why were cars melted, but trees untouched? Why were development companies making offers on burned properties within weeks? Why did every investigator who found suspicious evidence get silenced or reassigned? She wrote the story, a comprehensive investigation, questioning the official narrative, presenting the evidence, letting readers decide. Her editor spiked it. Too speculative, too controversial. We need more proof before we can publish accusations like this. I have proof, she replied. I have forensic evidence, survivor testimony, satellite data, official documents showing land acquisitions. What more do you need? This implicates major corporations and government agencies. Without absolute certainty, we can't run it. The legal liability alone would destroy us. And honestly, this sounds like conspiracy theory. Our readers won't take it seriously. She tried other outlets, larger newspapers, national magazines, network news, same response everywhere. Too risky, too controversial, too far outside the accepted narrative. Finally, she published independently, online, on her own platform. No editorial oversight, no institutional backing, just her reporting and her evidence. It got traction, tens of thousands of views, shares across social media, people commenting, questioning, digging deeper, but also attacks, accusations of misinformation, fact-checkers labeling her work as conspiracy theory, bots flooding her posts with negative comments, her credibility systematically undermined. Major platforms throttled her reach, shadow banned her accounts, flagged her content as potentially misleading, made it harder for people to find her work. She kept reporting, kept investigating, kept publishing, because the truth mattered. Because the victims deserved to have their stories told. Because someone had to ask the questions nobody in power wanted asked. But she was fighting an uphill battle against institutional media that protected power rather than challenged it, against tech platforms that controlled information flow, against a public conditioned to dismiss anything that contradicted official narratives as conspiracy. Still, she persisted, because sometimes truth finds its way. Sometimes enough people notice. Sometimes the cracks in the official story become too obvious to ignore. She didn't know if she'd succeed, but she knew she had to try. 6 months after the fire, the official announcement came: the Lahaina Sustainable Smart City Project, a comprehensive rebuilding plan, modern infrastructure, green energy, affordable housing, economic development. The presentation was slick, professional, full of promises about honoring Hawaiian culture and serving the community, about building back better, about creating the future of sustainable urban living. But the details told a different story. The project would be managed by a private development consortium, mainland corporations, tech companies, real estate firms, not local control, not community input. Corporate governance disguised as public-private partnership. Housing would be affordable, meaning expensive by Hawaiian standards. Most former Lahaina residents couldn't afford to return. The new town would be for professionals, remote workers, wealthy retirees, people who could pay $2,000 per month for a one-bedroom apartment. The cultural heritage promised in the presentation was tokenism, a few historic sites preserved as museums, some street names kept, token recognition of what had existed, but not real continuity, not true preservation. It was erasure disguised as progress, displacement marketed as development. The activist obtained a leaked copy of the master plan. The full version, not the sanitized public presentation. The actual blueprint. It was worse than she'd imagined. The smart city wasn't just development, it was a surveillance and control grid. Smart meters monitoring every household's energy use, facial recognition systems throughout public spaces, digital tracking of residents' movements and activities. The documents framed it as efficiency, security, modern amenities. But it was control, corporate and governmental control over every aspect of life in the new Lahaina. And the land ownership structure was designed to prevent Native Hawaiians from ever reclaiming control. Complex corporate entities, long-term leases instead of fee-simple ownership, legal structures that made it nearly impossible for individuals or communities to buy property. The new Lahaina would never be Hawaiian again. It would be a corporate-owned theme park, a showcase for smart city technology, a playground for the wealthy, built on stolen land, paid for with trauma and death. She published the leaked documents, explained what they meant, called for resistance, demanded the project be stopped. The response was immediate and fierce. The developers accused her of stealing proprietary information, threatened legal action, labeled her a radical obstructionist preventing progress. Government officials defended the project, talked about jobs, economic recovery, the need to move forward, dismissed criticisms as backward-thinking resistance to necessary change. But some people listened. Some people understood. Some people joined the resistance, and the fight for Lahaina's future continued. A quantum physicist consulted for the Hawaiian resistance pro bono, analyzing data, looking for patterns, trying to understand not just what happened, but why it happened in this particular way. She came up with an unexpected theory, based on quantum mechanics and the many worlds interpretation, based on the idea that every decision creates branching timelines. What if Lahaina burned because in other timelines, Hawaii succeeded? She asked at a strategy meeting. The room looked at her confused. She explained, the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, the legal challenges to the 1893 overthrow, the push for independence. In our timeline, those efforts have been suppressed, frustrated, kept from succeeding. But quantum mechanics suggests other timelines exist, parallel realities where different choices were made. What does that have to do with Lahaina, someone asked. What if in some parallel timeline, Hawaii won its sovereignty case, became independent again, kicked out the military bases, reclaimed control? That would be catastrophic for American strategic interests, for corporate profits, for the entire structure of Pacific power dynamics. But that didn't happen here. No. But what if powerful people can see other timelines, or have technology that shows them probability branches? They could see that Hawaii has potential to break free, to succeed, and they could decide to prevent it, not through obvious military action that would create martyrs, but through economic strangulation, through making life unsustainable for Native Hawaiians, through clearing them out slowly, methodically, until independence becomes impossible because there's no Hawaiian population left to be independent. That's horrifying. And it fits the pattern. Lahaina wasn't random, it was strategic. Take out a cultural center, displace a native population, replace them with compliant, corporate-controlled residents. Make sure Hawaii can never become independent because Hawaii isn't Hawaiian anymore. The theory sounded wild. Quantum timeline observation wasn't proven technology. The idea that decisions were being made based on parallel reality analysis seemed like science fiction. But it also made sense of things that otherwise didn't. The precision of the attack, the prepared land grab, the speed of the smart city plan, like someone had known exactly what to do because they'd seen the playbook from another timeline. Whether the explanation was correct or not, the strategy was clear. Erase Hawaiian identity. Replace it with corporate control. Make independence impossible, not through force, but through demographic replacement and economic control. And Lahaina was a test case, a proof of concept. If it worked here, it could be replicated elsewhere. Other islands, other indigenous communities, anywhere that resistance existed could be burned out and rebuilt in corporate image. The fight wasn't just about Lahaina. It was about whether indigenous peoples could survive in the modern world, whether land and culture could resist capital and technology, whether community could withstand corporate power. The stakes couldn't be higher. The former FEMA official had worked the Lahaina response, seen the classified reports, read the forensic analysis that never became public, knew what investigators really found, and he couldn't stay quiet. He reached out to journalists, to activists, to lawyers working on behalf of survivors, offering to testify, to provide documents, to expose what the government was hiding about Lahaina's destruction. He knew it was dangerous. He'd signed NDAs, had security clearances, could be prosecuted for disclosure, but he felt he had no choice. Too many people had died, too many had lost everything. Someone had to tell the truth. He was scheduled to testify in a civil lawsuit, survivors suing the county government and utility company. He would have been the star witness, the insider who could confirm the cover-up, the official who could validate all the suspicious evidence. 2 days before his testimony, he was found dead in his home, apparent suicide, gun in his hand. Note on the table. The note was generic. Depression, stress, sorry for the pain he'd caused. Classic suicide language. But people who knew him said he wasn't suicidal, wasn't depressed, was actually energized about finally telling the truth, about helping people get justice. His family demanded a thorough investigation, autopsy, toxicology, full forensic analysis. The police declined. Clear case of suicide, no evidence of foul play. Tragic but straightforward. His documents, the classified files he'd promised to leak, were seized during the death investigation, taken by federal agents, never returned, never made public. The lawsuit he was supposed to testify in lost its key witness. Without his testimony, without his documents, the case weakened significantly. Eventually settled out of court for far less than the plaintiffs deserved. Sealed settlement, no admissions, no accountability. His death sent a message to other potential whistleblowers, to anyone considering coming forward with uncomfortable truths. Talk, and you might end up dead too. Coincidentally? Tragically, but definitely dead. The pattern of deaths around Lahaina was becoming undeniable. The firefighter, the FEMA official, several survivors who'd been vocal about blue lights in the sky, all dying in accidents or suicides, all at convenient times, all removing obstacles to the official narrative. But each death also added to the evidence, made the cover-up more obvious, made it harder to dismiss as paranoia or coincidence. When enough coincidences accumulated, they stopped being coincidental and became proof of something darker. The resistance documented every suspicious death, built a memorial database, made sure the victims weren't forgotten, made sure their courage in trying to expose the truth was remembered. Because eventually, maybe not soon, but eventually, the truth would come out. The accumulated evidence would become too heavy to suppress. The deaths would demand explanation. Justice would arrive. Maybe. Spring 2024. 9 months after Lahaina burned, the resistance was holding ground, slowing the land grab, keeping attention on the suspicious evidence, making it harder for the developers to proceed quietly. And then Kauai had a fire. Different island, different community, but familiar patterns. Not as large as Lahaina, not as deadly, but selective destruction. Development zone areas burning while surroundings stayed safe. Water system failures. Reports of blue lights in the sky. The activists saw it immediately. They're doing it again, testing whether they can replicate Lahaina, whether the playbook works on other islands. The resistance mobilized faster this time, documented everything in real time, shared information immediately, made sure the world was watching before the official narrative could solidify. Media attention was stronger, independent journalists were prepared, the patterns were too obvious to ignore now. But the aftermath was the same. Development offers, land pressure, corporate buyouts, smart city proposals, the machinery of displacement starting to grind forward. They're going to do this to all of us, a Kauai community leader said. One island at a time, one community at a time, until we're all gone and Hawaii is just resorts and billionaire estates. The resistance started coordinating across islands, building a unified movement, preparing for the next fire, because there would be a next fire. The pattern was established, the strategy was proven: burn, displace, rebuild, repeat. The question was whether resistance could organize fast enough, whether exposure could create sufficient pressure to stop it, whether public outrage could override corporate and government power, or whether Hawaii would burn island by island until nothing of its indigenous character remained. 2 years after Lahaina burned, the town is being rebuilt, gleaming, modern, expensive, Everything the corporate planners envisioned. Most former residents didn't return, couldn't afford to, went to other parts of Maui, to other islands, to the mainland, became climate refugees in their own homeland. The smart city is showcase ready. Tech companies tout it as proof of concept. Politicians talk about resilience and recovery. Tourists book accommodations in the new boutique hotels. Nobody talks about the 100 plus dead, about the suspicious burn patterns, about the blue lights in the sky, about the stolen land and displaced community. The official narrative is complete. Tragic wildfire caused by climate change and utility negligence. Innovative recovery creating a sustainable future. Story closed. But the truth remains. Documented, archived, waiting. Survivors know, activists know, investigators who were silenced know. The evidence exists, the forensic proof, the satellite data, the testimony, all of it preserved in encrypted files and underground networks. Someday, maybe, it'll come out. Maybe enough people will care. Maybe justice will matter more than profit. Maybe the powerful will face consequences for what they did. Or maybe not. Maybe Lahaina is just the first, the prototype, the beginning of a new era where disaster is manufactured, indigenous peoples are erased, and corporate control becomes absolute. The Hawaiian activist stands on what used to be her street, looking at the gleaming new buildings that replaced her neighborhood. Knowing her grandmother's house, her family's history, her community's culture, all of it was burned away to make room for this. She pulls out her phone, records a message for history, for future generations, for anyone who will listen. They burned us, she says, deliberately, with advanced weapons, to steal our land, to erase our culture, to make Hawaii safe for billionaires and corporations. They killed over 100 people, displaced thousands more, and they're getting away with it. But we're not gone. We remember, we resist, we survive, and we'll make sure the world knows what they did, what they're still doing, what they plan to do to other communities, other indigenous peoples, other places that stand in the way of profit. Lahaina isn't over. This fight isn't over. Truth doesn't die just because it's inconvenient. Justice doesn't disappear just because it's delayed. Remember us. Remember what happened. Don't let them bury the truth with development plans and corporate PR. Don't let them win by making you forget. She ends the recording, uploads it to multiple platforms, encrypted, distributed, impossible to fully suppress. The message spreads, thousands of views, then millions, people sharing, commenting, questioning, demanding answers. It won't bring Lahaina back, won't resurrect the dead, won't undo the displacement and trauma, but it keeps the truth alive. And as long as truth survives, hope survives. And as long as hope survives, resistance survives. Somewhere in Colorado, a satellite operator monitors feeds, watching for the next anomaly, the next Dibu signature, the next attack disguised as disaster, ready to document, ready to expose, ready to prove it's happening again. Somewhere in Hawaii, communities organize, prepare, build early warning networks, make plans to resist the next land grab, the next fire, the next assault on their home. Because Maui wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The proof of concept for a new kind of colonization, one that uses technology and disasters instead of soldiers and treaties, one that erases indigenous peoples and cultures in the name of progress and sustainability. But knowing the playbook means knowing how to resist it. Awareness is defense, truth is weapon, memory is rebellion. Lahaina burned, but Hawaii remembers. And in that memory lies the power to prevent it from happening again. Whether that power will be enough, time will tell. The fires are coming, for Hawaii, for other places, for anyone in the way of what powerful people want. The question is, will we watch them burn, or will we finally stand up and say enough? The choice, as always, is ours.